Seeking Wisdom, Week 6, Esau and Jacob, the Reasoning of God, Genesis chapters 25 to 50. Section 1, Mystery of Choosing. Part 1, The Story of Esau and Jacob. From chapters 25 to 50 of Genesis are stories of the patriarchs' lives, Jacob and Esau, the twins of Isaac and Rebekah, and Joseph, one of Jacob's children. We will look at two main topics in these chapters: the mystery of choosing and the miraculous providence of God through the difficult life of Joseph. We are all surprised by the way God chose people. Why did God choose Jacob instead of Esau, the oldest son? Judging from Jewish tradition, Jacob, the second son, could not inherit the promises God made to Abraham and the legacy of Isaac. Jacob did not have the demeanor or personality that Esau possessed. In terms of faith, we could assume both Rebekah and Jacob lacked faith in God's promise, even though Rebekah was informed in advance. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The elder shall serve the younger. Some biblical scholars believe the transfer of firstborn rights was unusual and even impossible according to Jewish custom. By law, the right of inheritance can be transferred to anyone, but the firstborn son's right, which is inherently tied to the birth of one person, cannot be changed from person to person. Therefore, it can be said that the transfer of Esau's rights to Jacob are not viable. However, the author of the Bible wants to use this anomaly to emphasize that everything is possible with God, and the plan of salvation which God promised to Abraham continues to be carried out in the people of Israel, not with the people of Edom or the people of Esau's lineage. When Esau married the Hittite's wife, who were not in the same family, he separated himself from family ties, making him no longer worthy to succeed his father's lineage, passing God's promise to the next generation. Moreover, the author also wants to emphasize that God makes choices that are not always the way we would make choices. But when God has chosen, He had the power and strength to transform that person. For example, after Jacob was chosen and followed God while living in the house of his father-in-law Laban for 20 years, Jacob appears as a whole new character, full of integrity and trust. Part 2, Jacob's Journey of Faith. In a dream while Jacob was in Bethel, he saw a ladder connecting heaven and earth, and heard the promises that were made to his ancestor Abraham. But Jacob did not know there is God who dwells here. Jacob then took the stone he lay his head on overnight to make a pillar, and vowed that if God kept him safe, he would return to set up the altar of the Lord. In another dream, Jacob struggled with God and Peniel. After these dreams, Jacob became a different person, used his new name Israel, and lived a righteous life. His new name, Israel, later became the name of a great nation. Finally, when he returned to Bethel, he completed the vow to build an altar there to honor God, who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. These 2 events were the sign of a change in the journey of faith of Jacob. He went from a man who could only use his cunning ways to get what he wanted to now living and experiencing life with Abraham's God. He found God and let God lead him. Section 2, The Magic Providence of God. Chapters 37 to 50 is a very long and interesting story about the life of Joseph, who was one of Jacob's children. Joseph had suffered many unjust wrongs. His brothers sold him into slavery in Egypt, and he was unfairly accused and sentenced to prison. But God used these sufferings as a personal opportunity for Joseph when he was appointed governor over all of Egypt by the Pharaoh. This also became an opportunity for an entire chosen people, for through him, a whole nation of Israel was saved from famine. This explains how the Jews lived in Egypt for more than 400 years and how Moses liberated them from the oppression of the Egyptians in the book of Exodus. Joseph's life is seen as a symbol of the life of Christ. He suffered all the injustice, but because of his sufferings, we were saved. Indeed, the stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. The church rejoices in singing this psalm in a special way at Easter. Section 3, the Bible and Life. Part 1, Journey of Christians. The events in the lives of Jacob and Joseph show us that faith is a long journey, not just a theory or something we only need to grasp once. To believe in God is to enter into a relationship with Him. This relationship is one we experience, cultivate, and build through life's events. Many times on this journey, we find it difficult to live faithfully, especially when faced with life's trials and tribulations. Truly living faith is a struggle with God, a struggle with His call, a struggle with the ideals and values of the Gospels. But when we accept that painful struggle, a new person is gradually formed in us. And it is at this moment we encounter God through life in others and ourselves. Part 2, Christians living in the face of God. In our daily lives, we are called to learn to live in the presence of God, to live up to our potential and follow God's will. When suffering excessively because of trials, misunderstandings, injustice, or a lack of trust, remember that only God, the just judge and knower of all mysteries, will return justice for us. The suffering we suffer will never be in vain. God has a purpose for all of our trials. Suffering, injustice, and misunderstanding by themselves have no meaning. But God can make it valuable. In His hands, suffering will have purpose and meaning and bring greater value to one's life or to others. Part 3, Christians believe and trust in God. Christians are called to trust in God in every situation, and at the same time seek and act according to the will of God, because it is the way of salvation and peace. Christians are called to trust in God in every situation, and at the same time seek and act according to the will of God, because it is a way of salvation and peace. God kept His promises to the ancestors, not because of their ability or virtue, but because they were guaranteed by the power and goodness of God. Therefore, the key for believers is to never stop believing God will plan and save, and that belief will become evident in our lives as we grow in faith and obedience. Part 4, God forgives and forgets, even when we cannot. Joseph seemed to forgive and forget all the things his brothers had done to him in the past. In the eyes of faith, Joseph recognized that it was not his brothers that sold him to Egypt, but God had sent him ahead to save people's lives by making him the king's highest official and ruler of all Egypt. Joseph was not upset with and did not blame his brothers, but through this he realized the miraculous providence of God. Perhaps nothing could compensate for the bitterness Joseph had endured during the 13 years of imprisonment and slavery in Egypt, but through God's grace and love, everything was transformed. God has the power to transform evil to good. It is Jesus' suffering on the cross, a crime of humanity, that God cleanses us from all sin. As God has forgiven us, we can also forgive ourselves and those who have hurt us. Nelson Mandela was finally released from prison in 1991 after 27 years in prison rising to become the first black president of South Africa in 1994. 3 of the guards from the prison were invited to meet with Mandela. When Mandela stood up to respectfully greet these 3 guests, everyone present and around the world were silent with admiration. He acknowledged that it is a great tragedy to spend the best years of your life in prison. But if I had not been to prison, I would have not been able to achieve the most difficult task in life, and that is changing yourself. I had that opportunity because in prison, we have what we don't have in our life outside prison: the opportunity to sit down and think. Then he turned to the guards and said, "When I walked out of the prison cell and through the prison gate to be free, I clearly understood that if I could not leave my own pain and resentment behind, I am still in prison." Forgiveness is not always easy, yet it holds the power of freedom. Forgiveness allows the shackles to fall and deep healing to take place. And forgiving others is to free oneself. Thank you for watching, and we hope you join us for our new video next Friday. The answers to this week's questions will be revealed in next week's video. Remember, every Friday at 7 p.m., the Seeking Wisdom Challenge will be posted on YouTube and Facebook. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, or subscribe to our channel. Questions? Leave them in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and we wish you a wonderful weekend full of grace and joy.